Welcome to We Never Met, the podcast where I have interesting strangers on every single week. Today we have...
Sam Kirk.
I was actually introduced to your work because it's literally down the street from me right now here in Wicker Park. So I walk past a mural and I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool. And there's murals all over Chicago. It's very similar. It's where I'm from Milwaukee, and it's kind of where Milwaukee is going with a lot more like street art and just murals in general. But has that always been kind of, because you're from Chicago, has it always kind of been in the city, like the murals and sort of street art like that?
There definitely have been murals here for a long time. Yeah. The mural movement, as far as what we see now, where there's more of a narrative and kind of what people view as public art, has been active in Chicago since the 70s.
Okay.
It definitely wasn't as... you didn't see it as often as you do now.
Sure.
There was a good mix of a little bit of public art and a lot of graffiti. So I grew up seeing a good combination of both. I'd probably say I saw a lot more graffiti than I did murals. And now murals have kind of, public art has taken over, and there's this huge pickup of what you're seeing. And I think that comes from, one, the city is focusing a little bit more on public art, but also, there's a trend in street art, and brands are now also working with artists and muralists to collaborate to create, I think, more of a fun version of an outdoor billboard in some ways.
It's a good opportunity still to get your business out there without it being so in your face like a billboard is.
Right. Yeah.
So... growing up on the South Side, then, were you always very artistic as a kid? Was that something that came later? Because I know you went to school for something different, right? Or you went for interior design or something?
I went for interior design and marketing, and I ended up focusing on marketing. But as a kid, I was always creative.
Yeah.
I was definitely that kid, that doodled on the side of my homework. Or if we were sitting at the dinner table and there was a pen handy, I was drawing on my napkins and stuff.
What were you drawing? Like what sort of things?
Usually it was faces.
Oh,
it was
really?
still faces, more of a cartoon style.
Okay.
And I always seemed to start with either the eyes or the nose in my work.
Yeah.
And as a kid, I remember just drawing a lot of different eyes and, figuring out what I wanted these faces to look like.
Which is interesting because I feel like the eyes are like the toughest part to draw, At least in my experience, when I try to draw eyes, they always are weird.
Maybe that's why I start there. I don't know. It's like if I could get that part out of the way. Right.
Work your way. work your way
right, exactly.
So you started drawing sort of faces. Were they people that you knew, or just like sort of in your imagination what?
Totally made up. Yeah. I mean, every now and then, I would try to draw my parents. And even as a kid, I never really gravitated towards like a super realistic style.
Sure.
I did, learn how to do that in high school. Definitely took a lot of art classes and advanced classes in high school.
Yeah.
And worked on portraiture, but my imagination has always been really active, and I've always found that it just starts to drift to, oh, well, what if I did this? So as a kid, even as a teenager, and obviously into now, there's always been kind of this like more of an illustrative style, and kind of creating a little bit of my own version of things.
Yeah. So in high school then, like when you were about to go to college, was art something that was on the table for you, or were you just like, no? Was it because like you felt pressure to get like quote unquote a real job or something like that, or was it something different?
Art wasn't ever an option, even really.
Oh, really?
And I think it was mostly because I was the first person to go to college in my family. I have a twin sister, so technically we were the first people to go.
Yeah.
And our parents were very focused on, go to school for business. I graduated high school in 99. So computers and IT were big then.
Yeah.
So the focus was more on, what are these industries and these spaces where you're going to have job security.
Sure. Where there's going to be growth and like
right. And my parents were both, working class folks. They worked in warehouses, retail, restaurants, things like that. So art was always an importance in our upbringing, and it was important to understand culture
Sure.
and to celebrate culture and just to see, you know, where things came from, how things were created.
Yeah.
But I don't even think for them there was really ever a thought that, oh, you can be a professional, successful artist and, you know, make a successful career out of it. So growing up, I think I ended up choosing interior design and also marketing because there was just this natural desire to do something creative. And I've always enjoyed working with my hands, and interior design and marketing was like a little bit of business, a little bit of creative. So I was, you know, fulfilling the desire that my parents, right. Like I was like, okay, that has a little bit of business in it, but it still allows me to be creative. So, and that's part of the reason I didn't go into like sales for marketing. I stayed in advertising, and I mean, I really enjoyed advertising. I bounced around a lot. I worked in almost every discipline and really enjoyed being able to just, you know, come up with these wild ideas. Yeah. And I mean, that's why.
So were you doing your own personal art on the side while you were working in marketing, or was that kind of just off the table completely until later on? So
art became a big part of my life in high school because I came out in high school and art was really the thing that I used to figure out how am I going to talk about my identity. And so that is what cemented this hobby and this practice of it. It became a visual journal, more or less, you know. I've never been a huge writer. I do write sometimes, but it was more so just like drawing out everything that I was thinking and feeling. And when I finished college, that definitely took the back seat. And it was mostly because working in advertising, you work such crazy hours.
You don't ever sleep.
You don't ever sleep. So trying to find time to draw or draw to paint, it was, you know, rare. So the first, you know, 5-6 years of my career in advertising, I was just working on, you know, trying to build up my resume and get noticed and, you know, keep pushing forward. But once I did get to that point and I was in a supervisor's position and, you know, had a team under me, I did start painting again. And it was more for just like a stress relief. I started asking, like, why did I stop doing this? This was something that was so important to me. Because I stopped painting for almost like 6-7 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was at the end of my college career. So a little bit of the time in college and then also the beginning of my advertising career, I just stopped. It was completely because I had no time. I worked a full-time job while going to college full-time.
Wow.
So I just had no time. But then once I did pick it up again, I started to, you know, wonder, you know, what would it be like to be, you know, in a gallery or to show work in an exhibit. It was really just for fun. And I started painting in my office because in advertising, you know, I
literally live in your office.
Right, you practically live there, exactly. So I worked on the client side, so I was always client management, not creative. Not creative entirely, because I worked in sports sponsorship and entertainment marketing, so there's a lot of overlap there. But when I was waiting for the creative team to complete work, I was twiddling my thumbs in my office, you know, like or writing decks, you know. And when I finished up that stuff, it was like, what am I going to do? So I ended up bringing an easel into my office, and I started painting in my office, and ended up getting a show at the agency, talked to some of the office managers and asked about putting up, you know, some artwork on the agency walls. That went well. Some pieces sold. I got some commissions from coworkers. And then it just organically continued to grow. As I saw that people were interested in what I was creating, it sparked an interest in me to want to continue to see, you know, where this would go. And still, even at that point, I didn't think I was going to leave my career in advertising. It still wasn't even, you know, an option in my mind. But I got the show. I got a show at a gallery in 2009, and then in 2010, just from the continued commissions and everything, I got a couple pretty large commission requests, and it was just great timing. I wasn't completely challenged in advertising at the moment, and I found myself, even though I was having fun, kind of bored with the industry, I guess. So I was in a position where I had to make a decision. It was, take these 2 commissions, which were too big to do on the side, and leave, or stay and, not do the art. And I was like, well, how often does a kid like me get a chance to, dive into art full time and see where that takes me? So I did, and it's been 9 years.
How long? So when you picked up like painting again, did you have that same sort of feeling that you did when you were in college and high school, where you felt like it was like a visual journal and it was helping express, or was it a different sort of feeling at that point?
It was a completely different feeling. It was crazy because I didn't realize that I would have to build up my skills all over again.
It's not like riding a bike.
No, not for me. It's not. For some people, I have some friends, even my youngest sister, she's just got this raw natural talent, for art, and she can just draw things very naturally. And for me, it's something that I have to practice. Yeah. And I was like, what happened?
Where it's like that Space Jam scene when all their powers are gone.
Exactly. Yeah. I was like, oh my God,
what happened to me?
Draw anymore. Yeah. And it was really frustrating initially. And I just was determined to, get back into it and to be able to build that skill up again the way that I had. And initially it was about that. And I didn't really have a style. Mm-hmm. The funny thing is, I didn't have a style when I left my career in advertising.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I was still figuring out, what my style was going to be. I didn't really cement in what the look is that I have now until 2012.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So that was like what, 3 years after you did your first art show or something like that?
Yeah.
So were they all just different sort of styles at that point, or were they kind of similar?
The style was kind of similar. My color palette has always been the same. It's always been, these rich, vibrant colors. Mm-hmm. The content was similar. Initially, when I dived into my career, it was mostly about culture and a celebration of culture. I knew that was something that I'd be interested in continuing, but the style itself, no, I was still developing it, and it was one of the most frustrating parts of, leaving my career and starting essentially a business. Yeah, I just, for the first 2 years, I was like, "What am I doing?" Because I was just struggling to figure out, how I was going to develop a consistent portfolio when I didn't even know what that looked like.
Or meant,
and also, that's the one thing I think in my career that is traditional as far as, following an art practice is I have a consistent style, which is kind of like you have to so that people recognize it to an extent, right? Because Picasso changed his stuff all the time, but whatever, he's different. But it was definitely a huge challenge because I couldn't really go too far without having that.
Right.
So for 2 years, I was taking in commissions, but still at the end of the day, finding like, this doesn't look completely like that. Yeah. It's not a body of work. So how do I pitch? And coming from advertising, I knew I had to pitch. I had to, be able to try to get more jobs and projects, but I couldn't do that until I developed this. So I think I jumped out of the career a little too soon. I always tell people, like, if you're going to leave your career, have the body of work together first.
Like, get all your ducks in a row before you just jump ship.
I have a few things I can, give for advice, because the first 2 years were tough, but.
Yeah. So when you were like doing all those, how did you land on the style that you landed on? Because it is very unique, and now you can tell just based on, seeing a piece of yours, like, oh, Sam Kirk did that for sure. Mm-hmm. Was it just like, were you at the end of the day like, we're just doing this one, that's the one, okay?
No, I remember specifically actually the piece that helped me. It was a piece that I painted of a friend of mine named David Lozano, and there was like a silhouette of his father behind him.
Oh.
And I had a show at a gallery in Pilsen, and this portrait was one in particular. This guy just has very strong facial features.
Okay.
And when I was drawing his face, I started to notice these lines that I was making, like to develop his cheekbones and nose and everything. And I liked it. Like I really enjoyed a little bit of the geometric style that was coming through it, but then also being able to, you know, make some of these really cool curves and things. And I found that in putting it together, I was also able to still create depth, and I was able to show texture, but still using like these flat colors and, you know, different colors. And then I'm biracial, so I also, it just started to click like, oh, you know, this could be one way that I can also show like how there's so many differences in one culture with color if I break it up in this way. And I kept thinking like, I don't know that there's any other way that I can do this in a way that I feel good, because if I go more realistic with my portraits, then the skin tone has to look exactly like the person.
Right.
But if I painted myself, I can give myself all of these different flesh tones that represent what my parents and my family look like, even though I don't necessarily have that. It starts to show a little bit of a deeper side of the history of the person, as far as, you know, what their family features and what they look like. And I enjoyed that. I really liked that. But that was the piece, and, you know, that was when, you know, that started to develop. And that piece was in 2010, I think it was, but I still didn't realize like that was it completely. I had to keep working at it, and something kept drawing me back to that portrait. Like I really loved looking at it, and then I decided, you know what, let me start to draw some other portraits like this and see how that goes.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So did you have that conscious idea while you were doing it, or was it sort of like you just it kind of turned out this way, and then afterwards you're like kind of analyzing it and be like, oh wow.
Yeah, it was completely afterwards.
Yeah.
Very organic. And honestly, that's one of the things I try to keep in my work now, is to just allow there to be some just organic part of the process, because I find so much of my career has been about experimenting and exploring and playing with materials, but also with design. And I find that, you know, the most interesting pieces that I've put together come from that. So I just try to continue to let, you know, this organic process kind of carry me, and not try to say, oh, I need to, you know, stick to this or just need to do that with the work.
Yeah, I mean, like the whole like the skin tone, all that stuff just blew my mind, because I was like looking at all your stuff and I'm like, I can really see that now. Like that, it makes a lot of sense, you know. And it's really cool to like look at something in that sort of layered way, where there is more than just obviously what you see. And I think that's what makes art great. Yeah, you know. So after this point, because you went to New York and came back, and we're kind of going back and forth for a while, right?
Yeah, we still go back and forth quite a bit. So I moved to New York. So I moved to Minnesota first. I was there for a year. It wasn't really my thing. Just
to see how it was, or? Yeah,
to see how it was. It was another bigger city in the Midwest.
Did you go to Minneapolis?
So, Minneapolis, yeah. Just a little too slow for me.
Yeah.
Not enough mixture.
Yeah.
I grew up in the inner city, and I love being able to walk out of my house and not know what I'm going to see every day. I love being able to, you know, walk down a main street and there's something totally different. Yeah, there's some things that are the same, you know, there might be the same, you know, elotera or street vendors are, you know, common on certain corners, but generally you see something every day. And I didn't realize until I moved to Minneapolis that that was essential to my art career, because people are the core inspiration behind my work. And if I'm not engaging with community or surrounded by people at some point, I'm not getting the stimulation or the interest that I need. And Minneapolis was just a little too slow for me.
I mean, with 3.5 million people here, it's tough to go outside and not see something different.
Right, exactly.
Something's got to change at some point.
Right. So then New York, obviously, is, times 2 of that, right? So I moved to New York, and I mean, that was just absolutely amazing for me. Sometimes overstimulation. I actually found myself coming back to Chicago sometimes to process
which is crazy. Right. This is the top level for some people too.
Yeah. So I mean, so many people would say that to me. They're like, "What do you mean Chicago's easy?" It's like Chicago is a breeze compared to New York. New York is so fast. Yeah. And you're just hit with for somebody who wants stimulation and constant. It's just all day long, I would keep a book with me. That's actually when I started writing a little bit more, was when I moved to New York. I would keep a book with me because I would get so many ideas in a day from all of this interaction with, people on the train, on the street, or just things I would, happen to see. Yeah. I have more ideas written, down from living in New York than I will ever even, I'll never be able to produce that much. Yeah.
Well, that's good. That's a good problem to have.
Yeah, without a doubt.
It's better than the opposite. Right. Just got to twiddle your thumbs. Right. Oh, I really wish I was inspired.
Right.
But you also talked about, I saw you talk about when you went to New York, it kind of like changed how you thought about like your identity and culture and things like that. Can you talk a little bit about that and like what you learned about yourself when you went out there?
Yeah, well, it definitely changed a lot of who I am individually. And I think most of that was because, I grew up in Chicago, and fortunately, we moved a lot. Like we lived in probably 9 different neighborhoods as just within my childhood, or 9 different homes. Yeah. And mostly because my parents, were working class or trying to figure out, what's a better neighborhood.
Trying to get a good deal on
exactly.
Rent and stuff.
Good rent, good schools, getting to the, next best place. Yeah. And that was great for me because I got to see so much more of the city than I think a lot of people do. Some people just stay in one neighborhood, they go to work or school and come back, Right. But the segregation here is very limiting. And I didn't realize how much that was ingrained in who I was until I moved to New York. I didn't really start to realize, how we identify people here and how much of that is based on skin color or area. And that was different in New York. I found that I didn't have to explain my cultural makeup as much as I do here.
Do people ask that?
Yeah. People ask me all the time what I am.
That's such a weird thing to ask somebody.
People ask all the time, what are you?
I never get asked, obviously.
Yes, people ask all the time, what are you?
Yeah. If you're any darker than white, they'll always ask.
And if I have a tan from painting murals in the summer, then they assume I'm something else, So,
yep.
I get asked that all the time. And also, like, my wife is from Brooklyn, and we live here now. And she's Costa Rican and Jamaican and Irish. And to most people here, she, just looks like a black woman, so they don't expect her to speak Spanish, especially on the South Side. In Humboldt Park, yeah, sure. But it just shows how much the segregation in the city impacts people's ability to understand culture and to understand like the wide ranges of what people can look like. Yeah. And the possibilities for the languages that they speak. Like no one in little village where we live ever expects her to speak fluent Spanish.
Which is funny because she's not even from here in the first place. Like the ironic thing about all that is like they're making assumptions just based on where you are. Right. Like location wise.
Exactly.
Which is funny because you could just be from anywhere in the United States or in the world and just be there for some reason.
Exactly. Yeah. But in New York, I just found that I was able to open up a bit more. And it's for so many reasons. You know, there's a lot of layers to my identity. I'm minority in multiple ways, right? I'm a woman. I'm a woman of color. I'm queer. All these things, and I feel like that is more limiting in Chicago in ways that it's not in New York. I think one good example is just being part of the LGBT community. That doesn't really exist on the South Side. Not in a way. There's people there, you know. There's definitely queer people on the South Side, but is there a obvious safe space for that community?
Right. Yeah.
Not really, right? In New York,
to go somewhere else.
Exactly. I always feel like I have to go somewhere here to feel that, whether it's spaces that people are creating that, yes, are also on this. There are some groups that are creating those spaces on the South Side, but it's like, okay, now I'm in this enclosed space. I can feel comfortable, but the minute I walk out the door and I'm on the street, I got to watch my back.
Yeah.
And it blows my mind that, you know, that's the thing here, but
it's like neighborhood specific almost. Like
it's neighborhood specific.
The services in the neighborhood are specific to that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in New York, I just feel like, you know, that's past. There's definitely still neighborhoods in New York where that's an issue. You know, I mean, if we look at this last year, you know, there was a rainbow flag burned in Harlem right before all of the WorldPride things started. We also were booked to paint a mural for WorldPride, and we were also rejected in several places in New York. And people,
like the building people told you,
the property owners.
Oh, wow.
They didn't want LGBTQ themed work on the walls,
which is why,
right? And it's New York City. Right?
Do you ever get to ask like why or like what's up?
So for one of the spaces, I did ask why, and that space was actually in Harlem as well. And it was actually a principal for a school. He responded that there wasn't a large LGBTQ community in Harlem, and that he didn't feel that
he decides that
exactly.
That's his territory to decide,
and he didn't feel that needed to be the focus. The focus should be on something else. And it's like, well, you know, we're doing this for WorldPride, so there has to be right. And you know, if you see a lot of my work, and I had this conversation, you know, too with them, it's not like what we painted and what we ended up painting and what I presented as the concept wasn't something that was overly queer, if that's a thing, right? So for some people that is a thing, you know,
or like super explicit.
Exactly, right.
It's on it's like a kid's school, right? Or like
it was on a kid's school. And the piece was a portrait of a woman named Victoria Cruz. She's a Puerto Rican transgender woman, and I mean, it's a portrait of a woman. It's a portrait of a woman of color, and there were some colors that were used that were the colors that are in the trans flag, but they weren't done in a way where it's like we're waving a flag or anything. So for anyone walking past who doesn't know, she would have just looked like a woman of color, right, with, you know, some pink and blue, wrapped around like the mural. Most people wouldn't have even known. So
it's like the context even just bothered him.
Yeah,
it's like you drew like I don't know. Like a clearly straight person getting stabbed in the neck,
right?
By
exactly.
I don't know.
The fear was, you know, when it came down to it, the fear was like, oh, if somebody asks who this is,
I have to explain it, or
right?
I don't know,
right? And
which is crazy.
They didn't want, you know, that to be the representation on the wall, you know, which is why I continue to try to push to have more work like that in neighborhoods.
Do you run into that a lot, even like here too?
Oh yeah.
Is it's worse here probably, right?
It's the same, honestly. It depends on the area, because even I did a mural in Boys Town with a couple other artists, and when we were looking for a location, even in Boys Town, and maybe it's because Boys Town is starting to change a little bit and there's more families and stuff showing up there, but they didn't want a completely LGBTQ piece on the wall. This is Boys Town.
Like, that's a place for sure.
Right.
Like, yeah.
Exactly. So Yeah, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. But
yeah, and so you did like the banner wrapping.
Oh, Times Square.
Yeah, in Times Square.
Yeah. So for WorldPride, they also used my work, and then there was a piece that my wife and I did for Brooklyn Community Pride Center.
Is she an artist as well?
Yeah, she's an artist. She's an illustrator and a dancer.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, she does cultural dance, mostly Middle Eastern, Northern African dance, and that's her majority. And she's recently gotten back into doing more illustration and art. She did that for a while as well, but is getting back into it. But we paint a lot of the murals together.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, but we collaborated on a mural for Brooklyn Community Pride Center in 2017, and they used that piece for the wrap in Times Square along with 5 other designs that I did, and it was amazing because I create so much work, and a lot of the purpose behind it is to have positive representation of people, and for some of these pieces that I drew, I had created them just because I felt like they were necessary to be created.
Right.
There was representation for different people within the LGBTQ community that were, Muslim, Asian, African American, Latin, and sometimes I create these things and I know that I can sell them as like prints or as original pieces to specific people who want that in their home.
Right.
But it's rare when I create something and I'm like, I'm going to send this to them and they're going to use it.
Yeah.
Because I've just received so much hesitation from different spaces on using work like that for the public. So when my team and I have a management team in New York, we submitted the work to Heritage Pride for the Times Square wrap. We were shocked. I mean, they used every single piece, and it was amazing because it was like the perfect way to represent World Pride. It was the LGBTQ community from a more of a global perspective, figures that represented people that, yes, live here, but also across the world that are part of this community.
Right.
And one of the main pieces that was used was a woman in a hijab that I had actually drawn several years ago, with a rainbow flag wrapped into it. And that was the thing that was most produced in the entire wrap, which I was really surprised about, but just really happy that they were able to do that. But yeah.
I mean, if your expectations were like, I'm going to give them all these just in case, like maybe none of them will get it. How was your feeling when you actually saw it was in Times Square? That had to be mind blowing.
Oh, we were completely shocked.
Yeah.
Because we went down there, and so I proposed to my wife on a Friday, and then we decided to get married on a Monday in New York.
Efficiency.
Yes. Yeah. We're like, we're not wasting any time. We're doing this. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And we happened to be in Times Square because we were looking for outfits.
Okay.
We had looked all over Brooklyn, and we were trying to. So you didn't even know
at this point.
We knew that the work was going to be up. We knew that they were going to put it up, and they told us they were going to print it at a very large scale.
Okay.
But they didn't tell us that, and they also told us that they were working with several artists.
Oh, sure.
And they were going to be printing different artwork by different artists. Putting up in Times Square on these big banners. Okay. We had no idea exactly where in Times Square. Everything moved so fast.
Right.
But we were down there looking for things, and all of a sudden, one of my pieces caught my eye, and I told Jen, "Oh my God, our work's up! It's like right there." So we are walking down because obviously we want to see, and as we keep getting closer, we're like, I don't see anyone else's work. Like it's all our work. Yeah. And we're like, when does it end? Like,
Does it? Keeps going.
We're like, is it a whole block? And, we walk that whole block and then we turn the corner and there's another block. And it's like, so it was wrapped around the entire block of the main stage in Times Square. And I mean, it's just unbelievable. As an artist, and it's definitely been one of my goals to, try to get my work in a space like that.
Yeah.
And to have it not only, there, it wasn't something that was just flashed up on a billboard right away. Like it was there for days.
Yeah.
And to see people engaging in it and to see the reaction, and especially to see most of the reactions we saw were extremely positive. And you know, seeing people taking pictures in front of works that represent people that you don't typically see, you know, if you look up LGBTQ community. Was just really amazing.
Drag that principal down there.
Yeah, right. Right. Yeah, totally.
You could add something like this, man. It would have been cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, that had to be, because that's like, it's literally the biggest city in the United States, in the most iconic part, like internationally.
Yeah.
In the most iconic part of New York City. So like, yeah, I can't imagine the feeling.
Yeah.
Of seeing
And
that.
you know, like, it's just, when we stepped back, it was like, wow, exactly what you're saying. There's so many people here visiting the city from all over the world.
Yeah.
So we're not only reaching New Yorkers who would, you know, so many of them would already be like accepting to this work, but we're reaching also people who are from other places and other countries with this work. And it's one of the things I love about being an artist, is having the ability to use work to place images into people's minds that, you know, we don't see that often, or we don't see ever. You know, I think about, you know, when we went to Morocco, it's illegal to be gay there. So if there was someone from Morocco that happened to, you know, walk past that, how often are they going to see you know, people that look like them, and women who are, you know, wearing hijabs or head wraps that are representing, you know, the LGBTQ community in that way. Yeah, it was absolutely beautiful. It was great.
Yeah, it's like a way to kind of, you know, spark something in their mind too. You know, maybe they didn't even like, oh yeah, this is a possibility. Like this is I wasn't even thinking of this before. Yeah, that's got to be really cool. And so, at this point now with art, like, how do you feel? Like, why do you still do it? Like, what is the driving force now for you still behind creating every day? Like, is it still just a great way to express yourself and all that stuff, or is there like more layers to it at this point?
I mean, it's a combination of things. It's definitely, without a doubt, a way to express myself. But more than that, I've really seen the power that art has, especially over the last 9 years. So much of what I've focused on in content is using art to address conversations that we're having that are about social justice issues or political topics. It's been just fascinating to see how somebody can look at an image or engage with a piece that I create, and the curiosity just starts to go, you know, and I find myself having conversations with people about topics that they might not have ever really, you know, talked about, or that, you know, aren't being discussed in their family. And really, you know, that's the driving force behind it is, I'm really curious to see, you know, how much can I push my career to create work that really gets people to understand all of the layers that make up our lives and who we are. We're
all complex, you know?
Every single one of us are. And I think if we are able to see that more often in each other, we will live in a better world.
Yeah, there'll be a lot more empathy. Yeah. A lot more just thoughtful conversations.
Yeah.
I think, you know, in art is just a great way to like have those conversation starters without, I think for a lot of people feeling like maybe it's like they're getting yelled at or something, you know what I mean? It's like, it's a very like good, like, because it's interpretive and you can kind of get what you want out of it and tells a message, but it doesn't feel like someone's like, I don't know. You know what I mean though?
No,
like,
I totally know what you mean, because especially with, you know, with my work, I'm not one of those artists where I feel like I want to, or I need to describe to you what I want you to get from the work. I want you to look at it, and there's enough in most of my pieces, especially in my studio practice, and even now in my murals, I'm starting to add a lot more into the background, where there's this narrative that, you know, you can walk past a mural at one point and you might catch something one day, and then the next day you catch something else. But there's enough in it where you can start to, or the viewer can start to, you know, collect their own thoughts and, you know, create their own questions. And if they want to ask me about it, great, but you don't have to ask me. You can ask, you know, your neighbor or, you know, your kids, or I'm just happy if it's sparking the conversation.
Right.
Because I think that's, you know, art has the ability to do that, to your point, in a way that isn't as intrusive or it's, you know, it's not as in your face as, you know, sometimes with the media or sometimes even with, you know, written words.
Right. It's like it's more of a slow burn. You know, it's you can keep coming back, keep seeing new little gold pieces in there, like, oh, I didn't even notice that this time. So you do work with like kids too, though. How cool is that to like give back and like see kids create stuff? And I'm sure like there's kids that are like amazing artists that are like waiting to grow up and conquer.
I mean, I've been doing quite a bit of work with an organization called I Paint My Mind, and they're based here in Chicago. They've been running for several years now, and I mean, the work that they do is amazing. But one of the parts of the program is I get to go into classes and do workshops, and in most of my practice, I don't really get to do that as often. Sometimes I'll do like a 1 week or 2 week workshop, but with them, I do like short 1 day workshops. And the most recent one, I met with some second graders, and it was amazing because the teacher was using this curriculum that the organization gave them, where she really, you know, teaches them about who I am and my work. And I walked into the classroom, and there's all these little drawings that look like studies of mine, kind of, but it's completely about them. So it's their self-portraits, and then the background is filled with the things they love about their community and everything. So it's just really cool to see that, mostly because, you know, growing up for me, and probably for you too, so much of the artists we studied, they were dead. You know?
Oh yeah, all of them, I think.
Right. Yeah. So I definitely wasn't learning much about living artists, you know, growing up, especially as a second grader, and having access to somebody that can come in, and then you go out into your city and you see their work, you know, out and about in your neighborhood. It's just great, you know, to have that interaction with them, and to be able to answer their questions as well. But then also just even, I did a 3 week workshop in Vermont recently that was on art activism with teenagers. And it's unbelievable the stories that they will create and the concepts they will create once you know, get them to activate their imagination. Yeah. And
that's about the time you lose it.
Yeah.
right at that age.
Yeah. So it's a fun process. It's a little challenging sometimes, especially if it's, you know, a social justice topic, because it's always getting over, you know, that hurdle of, all right, we're going to talk about this difficult thing. And we have to be, you know, raw and open and vulnerable, because that's how we create our best work. But it's been really great, the opportunities I have had to work with kids to see, you know, what they are able to produce. Yeah.
It's great that you're doing that, because you know, when I was growing up, very much to your point, even all the art in our house was like from dead people. You know, it's like, it was like reprints of like Monet paintings and stuff. And it made me think, when I was growing up, I'm like, is this extinct? Is this like an extinct career? Because like, does anybody alive do this? It ended in like 1920, and then nobody does it. We're done arting, guys. It's over. Okay. We got to go do regular jobs. So I had that very, very similar feeling, and no one was even talking about it. Like teachers, even art teachers, they weren't like, this is a viable career path that you could have. Nobody ever said that. They just were like, okay, go to college or something, you know, do that.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. I don't ever remember any of my, you know, art teachers ever really saying, hey, you know, you're pretty good at this. You should maybe consider a career in art.
There's some teachers that should do that. So currently right now, I just saw this on your website today. Is there an exhibit you are currently doing? Till December, right?
Yeah, so I have work up at the Dorothy Donnelly Foundation And that's a little bit more of a harder exhibit to get into just because it's in their private offices. But I also have an exhibit opening at Co-Prosperity Space, which is in Bridgeport. And that opens, Aaron's going to kill me. He's a curator. I can look it up on my phone. I think it opens October 12th.
You can look it up if you want. Get the exact date.
And then
otherwise people are just going to be there when it's closed.
I'm trying to get better at remembering all of this stuff. But I also have an exhibit. I'm doing, I haven't done this for a really long time, but I'm doing I'm participating in a slaps show.
What is that?
So slaps are drawings that are done on USPS priority mail labels.
Oh, cool.
So a lot of, artists have been drawing on it forever.
Yeah.
But recently there's become a bigger trend, and it's been, a trend for a while, but recently it's grown a little bit bigger. But they get a big group together. I think this show has almost 100 artists in it.
Wow.
And
do you have to incorporate like the type into your art or something, or you can just do whatever you want?
No, you just draw whatever you want. It's almost like drawing, a page in your sketchbook, but it's on a sticker. And I love it because it's a really great way for people to get affordable pieces of original artwork.
Yeah.
Because they usually require that all of the pieces are sold at a certain amount. I haven't seen any show that, sells it over 50.
Okay.
So for artists, and it's great because it's usually, very new artists, emerging artists, mid-career artists. And, for those artists who have been, at it for a while, it's a great chance to get work there.
And you only do one of them, right? So it's like, or do you do more?
I'll probably do 4 for this show.
But still, that's not a very high amount. So if you're getting one, it's like, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's one of 4.
And I almost never do this. So, and even just to sell, original piece at that low of a price, it's pretty rare, but I think it's cool. I sell prints and stuff, but my paintings at this point in my career are a bit more expensive.
As it should be.
Yeah.
So the question I have for that is, do you do them beforehand, or are you doing them there? Like
I'm going to do them beforehand.
Okay.
Yeah. All the artists will do them beforehand.
But you also have a website, I am Sam Kirk, right?
Yes, I was right. It's October 12th.
Okay.
It's called Networks of Resistance, which is really great. So it's a group show, and it's several Chicago artists that are doing activism-based or social justice-based work. So I'll be in it along with William Estrada, who does amazing work as well. I think Aaron Hughes is also showing in the show, but there's also a group called Just Seeds.
Okay.
And several of their artists are also going to be exhibiting work in the show. So it'll be a really powerful show for sure. But I'll have 5 pieces in that show. And then the Slaps exhibit opens the following week.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're busy though. You're all over the place. I'm sure people will see you somewhere at some point, or a piece of your art, at least.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, like, when did you get your website, by the way? Do you remember how long ago?
I am Sam Kirk?
Yeah. How long ago was that?
I got it at the beginning of my practice, so at least it had to have been 2010, 2009, 2010.
Because I was trying to get a website for myself.
Yeah.
And that was one of the domains I tried to get, very long, like 5 years ago.
Yeah.
But you had it.
Yeah.
You had it before me.
Well, someone else has samkirk.com already.
I know. I'm going to find that person. It's hard to spell my last name, so I'm like, I just need to shorten it. And then that'll be easier.
Yeah. I shortened my name, so sorry.
Yeah. And now I finally met you.
If it was Samantha Kirk, then I might be still available. But,
bummer. I'll just change my name. I'll just add the extra letters. Well, thank you for joining me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.